What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Folks, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, like this thing up, comment. It helps the show. It's a great thing. So what are we doing? Who are we talking to today? Well, I have somebody that he was an attorney. And he wasn't just an attorney for a little while. He was an attorney for 25 years, a prominent attorney. His name's Mikel Jones. And when I say he's a prominent attorney, he wasn't just one of those attorneys out there. He was a guy that was out and about. He was on numerous television, radio programs all throughout the country, and a very noted trial attorney. He's been in politics, a community activist. And he was known as one of the nation's top trial attorneys who was a member of the $1 Million Advocate Forum, one of the country's most prestigious legal organizations whose membership is limited to trial attorneys who acted as principal counsel in one or more cases where they obtained awards of more than $1 million. He also served as General Counsel for the late Congressman Alcee Hastings, which as we were just talking before the show, he was quite a guy in the movement, in the political world, and just an interesting fellow. But he's general counsel there, and they had quite a relationship for a long time. And then Mikel Jones ends up in prison for 36 months, 42 months sentenced. How did that happen? Well, he's going to tell us. He's going to tell us his story. And before we do that, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots, looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and finance. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Mr. Mikel Jones, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, I'm happy to have you here, and I'm so glad you made the time to do it, Mikel. And we had a great conversation on the phone. Sometimes I wish we would film those talks. We were just you and I just talking. And I think you were in your car. And
yes.
What a journey you've been on. I mean, you had a big law firm. You did a lot of political things. Take us back a little bit. What was it like for you growing up? Where did you grow up? Mom, dad, siblings? Were you always thinking you were going into law, or was that something that you came about in a later time period?
The community activist part started growing up, a lot of time growing up in West Philadelphia, product of a single parent mother. And fortunately or unfortunately, became involved in gangs, but that's where I met a number of people who at one time were friends. They were involved in gangs, and I started going to a place called the House of Emoja, run by Sister Falaka Fatah in Philadelphia, and I learned how to be very helpful. I used to help guys fill out applications at fast food restaurants.
Wow.
And that's how community activism. And of course, Sister Falaka's son went on to have a incredible, awesome political career, and several other guys who were affiliated with the House of Emotion went on to have political careers, but all started out as community activists. The law school part came as a result of being stopped one time by police officers, hassled for no particular reason. And I learned this phrase because I was an intern for the late Senator Hardy Williams. And when they stopped me and pulled me over, I said, "What was your probable cause?"
Right.
And they proceeded to tune me up right there on the street. And from that day forward, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Wow. I'm curious, Mikel, because you brought up the fact that it was a rougher neighborhood and there were gangs and friends that you had were in those. How did you navigate around that?
Well, my mom was awesome. Growing up in a household that was Catholic and leaning, a Catholic and Islamic household, predominantly Catholic influence. I went to Catholic school, but when you said neighborhood, you can call it like it is. Nobody has to tell me about Beirut because I grew up in Beirut. That kind of neighborhood, or neighborhoods, I should say. So it was, we didn't have that luxury of flight. So we had to stay and fight. And if you want to survive, not every young man had to join a gang. But I was really intelligent. So I joined a couple because I was all over the city. Mm-hmm. And it was just safer. It was safer that way. But I grew up, I spent a lot of time growing up in West Philadelphia. And I was able to navigate that terrain by being smart enough to want to live.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right. So you get pulled over. The guy works you over. How old would you? Guys worked you over.
One guy pulls me over, but the probable cause, and the next thing you know, it was a dozen guys.
Wow.
Wasn't just a guy.
How bad were you hurt?
Pretty bad enough for me to want to be a lawyer. But that didn't, pretty bad. Yeah.
So Mikel, what age would you have been at that time?
16.
Okay, so you were a teenager, just probably like sophomore, junior in high school.
Yes.
So you locked in on the fact, hey, I'm smart enough. I want to do something in the legal side of this. So how did you step forward into that?
Well, I should give credit. I went to two of the best high schools in the Philadelphia area. I started out at St. Joseph Prep. And then because of the tuition, I transferred over to Central High.
Okay.
So you get that foundation of wanting to go further, and so I did. Obviously, I went to undergraduate school, and from there it just kept going.
So when you went to law school, was it all that you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I wanted to be a baseball player. My mom's uncle by marriage was Larry Doby, and he was the first African American. He was the Jackie Robinson of the American League. Uh-huh. So I grew up with her taking me to Police Athletic League baseball. Mm-hmm. And I grew up with some guys who turned out to be really famous. But I thought I was going to be famous too. And my mother was probably the best coach I ever had in my life.
No kidding.
Yeah, and that's how I wound up at Pittsburgh playing baseball. But she was the one told me, "You're not gonna make it, son. You can't hit the curveball." and so
some guys in big leagues can't hit the curveball.
Yeah. And so that's when I seriously started thinking about something else, and always wanted to be a lawyer.
It's funny you say that because I was my dad was a D1 basketball player, and and I grew really fast when I was seventh grade. I was 6'1". That's like a 7-footer.
Ooh,
For guys.
yeah,
Because girls grow
yes.
faster than guys, and I always say, I peaked too soon. I about my sophomore year, I was as good as I was ever going to be, and everybody was passing me, and I went from this power forward to an off guard, and there's just no. There's not a lot of people out there looking for guys like me, but it's funny because you do have these things in life where if you're really in sports, and I love playing sports, you do have to find something else that becomes a passion. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you transferred that over and took your passion from baseball, and I know you like basketball. You took your passion for that and
We
brought it
froze up.
into your education and law. So when you went to law, I'm curious too, you playing baseball and how you worked around with the law and becoming an attorney. Did you use any of that, the competitive piece, the team piece, any of that stuff? Okay, folks, I have had something happen that I haven't had happen before. We're back. The building lost its internet. So it was, so we'll get this edit taken care of. But
Okay.
where we were is we were talking about Mikel, his love of baseball. He had some people that were, famous people that he thought he was going to be one of those famous guys. And his mom said he couldn't hit the curveball. So he decided to take that passion and roll it into what he could do going to be an attorney. And that's how he became this incredible attorney. So maybe he would have been a good baseball player if he could hit a curveball.
Yeah.
So Mikel, take us into a kid out of a tough neighborhood. You went to a good high school. I assume that you did pretty good. How was your undergraduate? Everything was good times and good grades, and then you roll into law school?
No, I had a stopover. In terms of working my way through life, I started working with. I started out with emotionally disturbed children because I got a master's degree in human services from Lincoln University, right outside Philadelphia, and so
Okay.
I developed this expertise um, to build community-based alternatives to psychiatric hospitalizations. Back then, kids were, going into state-run institutions or private institutions. The private institutions, insurance companies were using up to 30 days insurance. So I was on board with developing something called the Children's Crisis Intervention. And again, these were community-based residential programs that had some of the trappings of hospitals, but community-based. In other words, we would take a ordinary building and have all the staff there, the nurse, the medical stuff, the child care workers, but it was in the community. And then from there, it was easier to put them in a program that we would have like an aftercare program and ease them back into the community. So I did that for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. Meanwhile, I was still involved with community activism. And then that led to being a political consultant, which led me to Florida, which then led me to law school.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. That's why we have these interviews.
Yeah.
So you had a 10-year span there of really doing some things in the community
Yeah.
and working with these kids and
Yes.
creating something before you ever went to law school. So
Yes.
I'm curious, what was that like, Mikel, with being at that 10-year span and then going back into the academic world of law? What did you feel like you just jumped back into it, or did you feel like the old man at the schoolyard, or how did that work?
Listen, I was the only guy in my class. Obviously, I was the oldest, but I was the only guy who wore a suit and tie.
All
Um,
right.
Working for Congressman Hastings at the time, and that's just how I carried myself. But it's one reason that you want to support the diversity in any academic institution. But let's take law school. If you have
Okay.
all of the same type, then what kind of society does that make for? So you need people from various backgrounds and ages, to me, to become lawyers and to become productive members of the legal community and to be productive members of their community. So
Mhm.
yeah, I was the older guy and with the tie on, but no, and it was good. It was great because um, it's like going from college sports to pros, where the game is faster, where
Right.
you're smart in high school, uh, but law school is the big leagues. It's
That's
critical
right.
thinking. It goes from class coming down to one exam, and that's a lot of
Exactly.
pressure. So yeah.
So what you said that you said something in there that I thought caught my attention was that Congressman Hastings, you were already connected with him before you went to law school.
Yes. Oh, let me step back. I had done a year of law school, and I took a
Okay.
leave to run his campaign. That's what I did a year before that, and then I was running his campaign, while I was on leave, and then uh, then he allowed me to come on board and to go back to school, working my school schedule with working.
Wow. So you actually worked in his campaign or
Yes,
ran the campaign. I'm not
yes,
sure what it was. But then once he gets elected, you and him worked it out that you went back to law school and finished
yes,
up the years that you had left.
yes. That's correct.
Wow. Okay. So, well, how old was you been at this time when you got out of law school?
I didn't. What was the question?
How old would you have been when you got out of law school?
Let's see,
You've
maybe
been in your
35,
okay.
36,
Okay.
something
And,
like that.
and and so, Mikel, what were you thinking? Okay, I'm getting out of law school. I've got Congressman Hastings that I know and worked with. Uh, what was in your mind about what you were wanting to do with your life at 35, 36?
Well, I should offer that, I had also just started a family. My son was born. Um, uh, the 2 days he was born, 2 days before the congressman was elected, as a matter of fact. And so, I had to focus. I had to focus on that. In law school, I had the midnight shift, but that's when I studied. So I'm working in the day. I'm working classes in between afternoons or days and evenings, and studying at night while I was, waiting for my son to wake up and get him his bottle or tend to his needs. Um,
Yeah, doesn't
but
sound
it
like it was
also
easy.
exactly. But I was already good at politics. I was
Yeah,
already good at the community, and so to me, the two are supposed to go hand in hand. I don't know so much today, but then that's how it was supposed to go. Um, People who wanted to make a difference uh, aspired to go to higher office, and those that still worked in the community, they still work with those people that they helped get elected. That's how it was supposed to go, which is what I did. I was, a key component of establishing roots here in the community, um, in Palm Beach County, and in Broward County. And you can only do that when you're a people person, where you
hmm
can go out and meet people and find out what people need instead of telling them what they need. I think today a lot of what's going on is you got politicians telling people what they need instead of asking them what would you like, what do you need.
that's a good point. I think that's where politics has kind of gone off the rails. Uh, so you get out of law school, you've got a child,
Yes.
you're working a lot. It hasn't been easy. Um, do you go join a law firm or do you stay within the political world and how do you balance all that out?
No, as a matter of fact, I I have a network in the community. So, you get these cases um, by knowing people of influence in the community. And I
Mhm.
specialize in wrongful death cases. So
Mhm.
you get these cases referred to you, and it's unfortunately it's somebody's tragedy. Um, but this whole experience, what I should have let off was Mandela put it best: I never lose. I either win or I learn. So
Mhm.
in what I learned was I used to refer cases out in Philadelphia because I'm in Florida, and I
Mhm.
got complaints. My mother still lived here. My mother-in-law still lived in Philadelphia. And as my mother got older, I found myself going back and forth. And so what I decided to do was uh, I became general counsel, or I had become of counsel to a law firm in Florida, which was good at first, but it was part of my downfall. So with them, I partnered up with them and opened this law firm in Philadelphia. Had a great opening, people from the community, elected officials, um, and so that was the start of it. But it was a great start. Had several cases worth millions of dollars, and the law firm that I was of counsel to here in Florida. Then it was Gordon and Donner. Now I believe it's Gordon and Partners because Adam Donner, who at that time was a friend, he brought me into that firm. Um, but that firm gave me an ultimatum, and the ultimatum was, we either buy you and we own you. We own the name. Since they were funding it, they put a contract in front of me that said it was going so well. These guys didn't want to split anymore. They wanted to own my name, own me, and subsequently I said no. They pulled their funding, right? No, no, nothing. Just so that I reached out to, and this is what happened in the trial. They tried to paint me as some kind of, I don't know, not being honest. And I went to a lot of different forums, including John Morgan, to
Mhm.
partner up with me. I went to firms all over the country, but all of these firms, they wanted to own me and they wanted to put me on the side. But the people who came to me weren't looking for me to refer them anywhere. They hired me because they saw something in me as an individual, not just a lawyer or not a good
Mhm.
trial lawyer. And
Mhm.
so uh, I then hooked up with this lender out of New York. And even though my accountant at the time told me not to, he was one of the people later on who was pressured to testify against me. Um, so this law firm, they gave me a line of credit that was supposed to be my operating capital and was supposed to be money that I was to repay back. Um, and so I don't know. You may want me to stop there, and you may want to ask me some more questions. I
No, no, I think that's interesting because I think the easy path would have been for you to have just been bought out and they own your name, but you had it in you that you had the spirit that you wanted to be your own guy, you build your own law firm, build it as you, and but you found a way to get it funded,
yes,
and but this, from what I can read, Mikel, you had great success.
yes,
You had great success in the courtroom. You
yes,
had great success building a law firm. You had
yes,
great success being a guy that was out there being quoted on the
yes,
airwaves,
yes,
on TV and radio. So
yes,
you have all this going on,
yes,
and it's for a lot of people, whether they're in politics or they're attorney, you had everything that you wanted. I would
yes,
assume
yes.
in your profession. So when did things start getting where you were thinking something's going wrong?
Well, it, I was Ben Crump uh, before Ben Crump. I don't know if you know who Ben Crump is. The civil rights lawyer. He's a friend,
Mm-hmm.
good lawyer. And when you start making a difference in the community, that is a threat to someone or something, you become a target. And um, the affiliations I had with Congressman Hastings, Congressman Fattah, Congressman Howard Ford Sr., a lot of members of that I met, I became friends with, and I raised money for. I never had contracts, so nobody could say to me, "Oh, he's dirty. He had a contract. It was quid pro quo." And so the Justice Department, I can only think, were investigating um, Congressman Fattah, Councilman Curtis Jones, and they wanted me to wear a wire, and they still had it out for Congressman Hastings because he had
Okay.
been through a trial of his own and was acquitted, and they still had it out for him. And so I became a target that they were hoping would be easy and would wear a wire on everybody. And at the time, my
I
wife
mean,
and I,
we ought to talk about that for a second, because that is not uncommon that they take somebody that's around in the peripheral, they scare them with everything that you've got, say that they're going to indict you, say that they're going to take you down and your family down and whatever else. And how, how did you handle that?
well, we were at my house, and it's funny. I had a security system, and this played out later at a suppression hearing where the first thing my wife and I did when the FBI knocked on the door, they didn't do it like a SWAT thing, but they did have about 20 people. Um, and the first thing we did, we got down on our knees and prayed. And that's how I wanted to handle it. I wanted to turn it over to a higher power, because I knew I didn't I knew I couldn't handle it by myself. But anyway, the FBI comes barging in, the IRS with them with guns, and they're taking all kind of boxes of things out of my home. But while I'm there, they want to know if I'll wear a wire or if I have a recorded conversation with Congressman Fattah. And my friend at the time, he was even calling me on the phone, and I wish one day I could tell him. I didn't answer the phone because I just I didn't want anything to happen. Not that anything would have been said. I just didn't want anything. I cared about it. So I felt it better if I didn't answer the phone at the time. So they asked me, would you wear a wire on Fattah, Councilman Curtis Jones, Congressman Hastings, all of them? And my wife at the time she said she was the first one to say no, because they were interviewing her as well. And so in my home. And so that was the deal. The answer was no. And later on at court, a suppression hearing, that came up whether they had asked me to wear a wire. And the judge said, listen, once and for all, did you ask Mr. Jones to wear a wire? And an agent by the name of Haig, who, by the way, called me and kind of threatened me after he was at my home and said, don't hire a Philadelphia lawyer, or there'll be trouble, and that'll bother our investigation. So at the hearing, he had to answer the judge and said yes. And the judge said, well, what'd he say? He said he politely told us to go to hell, which was me.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how it started. I had became a target because somebody must have mentioned to the FBI, that, I mean, we were friends. We used to vacation together as families with
Yeah.
Congressman, his wife, his children. I was close to his children, particularly his son. And so and I was close to Congressman Fattah and one of his daughters. And so I guess they saw this as an inroad. We'll go in and tell this guy that I had a loan from a minority program in the city of Philadelphia. And they came in, and that was first. They said, you took this loan out and you didn't pay it back. So, that was fraud. But what came out in the papers later, there were 10 or more entities that got loans and didn't pay anything back. At least, what happened was the loan people came to me one day and said they're ending our program. and we're negotiating with all of the borrowers. What can you pay back? And I said, I don't have it like that, but I offered to pay them 20,000 on 100,000, and
Mhm.
they agreed. They said, okay, we'll take that. And what the FBI
Which you
wanted to
were
say,
acquitted on. You were acquitted
yes,
on
I
that
was
charge,
acquitted
Mikel.
on
Yeah,
that. Yes,
yeah, yeah,
because I had the paperwork. Um,
yeah.
but that led to them meeting with my lender out of New York on multiple occasions. And at some point, after the fifth or sixth time, convincing them to say that they weren't aware that I had used some of my operating capital for sports tickets to advertise. And at trial, the Justice Department initially tried to paint the story to the jury. Nobody does that. Nobody uses sports tickets for advertising.
Yeah, well, I have seen a lot of businesses over the course of time that
Yes,
they have those tickets to use
yes,
for clients
yes,
because they are, and I thought that was really, I looked up and tried to figure out because what we talked about and what was online, but it really does come down to a lot of everything that you just said. It came down to these sports tickets, and the and a lot of this stuff that you said about these loans, you were acquitted on, I forget on how many of these
yes,
charges.
yes,
And and the other crazy thing is that they kind of have chapter and verse a lot of times of how they go after somebody, and they included your wife to put more
yes,
pressure on you,
yes.
bringing her into the equation.
And that was my fault. I not to interrupt you, Brent. The phrase is I invited a stranger into my house. And how I did that was I made the statement to them that don't bother her. And once they knew that she was, and they may have done it anyway, but once they knew how
Yeah.
important she was to me, it was easy for them to go after her and make these allegations. I had a former disgruntled employee say that, yeah, Miss Jones used to come up here. She had her own job making 125 plus thousand a year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so the Justice Department never could make a case at trial that in some of these white collar cases where I went to those topless bars or we took vacations, we made over 200 something $1,000 a year between the two of us. So
Mm-hmm.
we didn't need that money. In fact, we were putting that money that we got as a stipend back into the firm. So
Right.
nonetheless, uh,
To grow your firm. Right.
yeah, to grow the firm. Uh,
I'm curious, Mikel, when that happened and they came into your house and they asked you to wear a wire and you knew that you were hot now and they were all surrounded with wanting Mikel Jones in this thing. How long did it happen until, because I think it's always interesting to talk to an attorney that goes through this, because most of the time when you go through a thing in the federal system, you're learning a lot of this through your attorney, but you were an attorney
yes.
going through this on the other side of things. Was it, first of all, how did that affect how you went about picking your attorney and how you absorbed this information with your attorney and how you chose uh, as we've always talked about on this show, 97% of the people indicted plea. You went to trial.
Yes.
Do you
Um,
think that played a role in how you handled this?
well, again, uh, it did, and I made the mistake that only a fool has himself for a client. Um, we should have never talked to the FBI. Should have just said lawyer right from the start, because later on in those, I forget 302s, whatever those forms are, they
Yeah.
made a lot of allegations that that weren't true, and that took course during the interview. And
Right.
so that was one mistake, and that was from being a lawyer. Um, I should go back to my
Which, by the way, for those who don't know or don't know, the FBI is one of the, as we all know, we're recording this right now. There's easy ways to record everything in the world we live in, but the FBI doesn't record their 302s. They write it from notes. I
yes,
always think that's interesting because why wouldn't you record an interview that you're having with someone, except for the fact that you're going to give your spin on what that interview and what that person said. I think that's one of the biggest things that could be changed right now in our justice system is anybody who's interviewed by an FBI agent and there's a 302 that goes down, that should be recorded.
It was
It should be
being
recorded.
Brent. It was being recorded by my home security system, and they
Oh,
tore it
wow.
out. They tore it
They
out.
took it
They
out.
tore all the wires out.
Of course
And
they did.
claimed, this was their claim, national security.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
National security. So they tore it out. It was being recorded because I told you they played a clip at a suppression hearing of them entering my house. It was being recorded. And when they
because
found
you
out
had
it
a
was being
security
recorded,
system.
that's when they stopped. So yeah, we would have had a record for that had it not been for this.
How long did it take you, Mikel? How long did it take you, Mikel, to go from that time to be in court, to actually have your day in court?
I'll answer that. I want to tell you before at my law firm, Brent, I employed, never would have thought down the road, I employed several former felons. Two as a paralegal, and one as an office administrator. The one gentleman I didn't know personally, but one of my advertisers who I knew from the community at a radio station asked me to hire this gentleman. He was trying to get his license back. I brought him on. And I brought another young man on who had a record as well and was currently in time, was doing time, and I got him out on a early release program. But fast forward, when you say how long it took, I wanted a speedy trial, and the government didn't, and they lied because what happened was the first assistant U.S. attorney on the case, he resigned and went into private practice. And the subsequent guy named Paul Gray, he lied and told the judge that I wanted a speedy trial and it was my fault. But they were the ones delaying things because it went from this one attorney, U.S. attorney, to Paul Gray, so they asked for a continuance. What they really were doing was continue to investigate and build up a case. Because subsequently on a superseding indictment, they brought in my lender from New York. And then on another superseding indictment, when they got another continuance, from the judge overseeing the trial, they brought in my wife. They indicted my wife on at the last minute. So if they came to my house in January, I wanted to go. We were due to go to trial, I think in June or earlier, and they postponed that to September, and then they got another postponement to November. So I went to trial in November.
Wow. Okay. So
my son had just started
almost a year
college.
Okay. What is going on with the family at this time? Your wife gets brought into this thing and died. You have your son. How are you guys dealing with this and this craziness that's going on? And you've got this law firm. How are you dealing?
Well,
how are you coping?
Let's start with coming out of prison. And I'll say that before getting people being released, bank accounts, teaching them whatever, I think mental health should be addressed even before being released to the community. I'm pretty sure I've never talked to her directly, but there's somebody on LinkedIn, I think her name wife after her name is Bruno, but she talks about family being affected, and afterwards, that's where things can happen. And so if you don't have that support, because see, families, if they haven't been incarcerated, they don't know what it's like.
Right.
So a family, when you come out, they want things to go back and you to go back like you were. They want everything to go like nothing had happened. Not understanding incarceration when you're treated like an animal,
Yeah.
um, and believe me, was treated like an animal um, on a daily basis. There were a couple guards that were instrumental in uh, me probably not dying in prison, and I respected them. They were former military, and they were officers, but they were good. They were good people. But the majority were. How far down can we grind these people? And
Yeah.
so that
Well,
you're
I
a
mean,
grinder.
yeah, and having your freedom taken away from you already is a mindset thing, a feel that going passing through, and basically being prisonized, losing your freedom. That's a whole thing within your mind, and then you're in this environment of this new world that you've got to learn how to navigate and live in. When you had your trial and you went into that courtroom and you had your jury and you got both sides, because this doesn't happen very often, people going to trial. Did you feel like you were winning, or did you feel like, oh my God, this I'm overwhelmed with what they're allowed to bring in here and what they're doing and how it's going? How did you feel when they finally had the jury come back in? Did you feel you were going to win, or did you feel like what was your feeling?
Let's go back to when you talked about a lawyer. He was a good lawyer. Because the IRS came to my house, I went and hired a white collar um, tax lawyer
Okay.
who defended that kind of thing. But he's out of Miami, um, and that was my first mistake. Not so much him, but I should have hired somebody in the Eastern District,
Right.
which would have been out of Philadelphia. That was
Mhm.
that was a mistake on my part, and part of that was Agent Haid threatening me. But I shouldn't have listened. I should have followed through and hired a lawyer um, in Philadelphia, if not Pennsylvania. Um, but certainly familiar with the Eastern District and all the various judges, and having done uh, these high-profile white-collar crimes. Because keep in mind, because of my affiliations, I was in newspapers in both Philadelphia and in South Florida, front page
Mhm.
kind of material,
Mhm.
and
Right.
that's what cost me. That's what cost my wife at the time her job, her pension, her career.
Mm.
Which obviously caused us problems, and I
Right.
understand because it was my fault. But so we're in trial, and the first day I'm thinking, oh, we're winning because um, uh, my attorney he had beaten up on on Haig, and there was one attorney who was on the go. Oh, there was one FBI agent who came to the house who did equal talking to Haig. Uh, he wasn't permitted to be a part of the trial because he had some disciplinary action at some point. So they couldn't bring him in for some reason. Um, but I'm thinking we're winning on the first day, and then the lies and the manipulation started piling up, and that's when the tide started turning. And another mistake I made was not testifying. Now you say, most criminal defendants aren't supposed to testify, Brent. You know that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I should have testified because I could have explained to the jury about the sport tickets and that it
Mhm.
was um, they focused in on these invoices that my accountant, who was affiliated with the lender, told me to submit them in the way that I did, and the FBI the Justice Department tried to say that they, weren't accurate. And what it was I had people in my law firm who wanted raises and wanted to know why was I spending. I was on buses, Brent. I was on billboards. I was on the subway. I was
Mhm.
on the air, TV, and radio. And I had staff members saying, well, why aren't you spending some of that money on us? And
Mhm.
and so I didn't want them to know how much I was spending on the sport tickets. And so
Mhm.
this accountant, he dreamed up of an idea. But if I had testified, I could have explained this to the jury.
Mhm.
And so that was, another mistake, not me not testifying. But when they went to the jury, I thought it was 50-50.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I was in a civil trial against my lender. They had finally filed suit, and so the lawyer in that case, he emailed me an email which said that the lender was aware of the sports tickets because I had put it on a budget in my proposal, and I had also put it on an invoice for me to be reimbursed because I would pay for the tickets and get reimbursed out of my operating money. And
Right.
so, but the judge said the jury had already started. He wasn't going to reopen the trial, based on this email that said that they were aware that I was using money for the sports tickets. There
Mhm.
was also a count in there about money laundering where I used some money from an account, and it was my money, and the
Mhm.
lender, along with the Justice Department, painted the picture to the jury that yeah, it was in my bank account, but it was their money because I owed them money. Well, they
Oh,
hadn't
wow.
defaulted. They hadn't
Right.
defaulted, so it wasn't their money. It was my money.
Right.
Even so, it's like a credit card company saying you got money in the bank that belongs to us because you owe us a
Right.
bill.
Your line of credit.
Yeah, and so that's
Yeah.
what they wanted to. That's what they painted to the jury that it was their money, and it wasn't. So you had that going on. Um,
Well, so when they came back in and they said that it was a guilty verdict, and I think at that time they decided with your wife. Well, I guess that wouldn't have happened that day. The sentencing would have happened. You would have gotten your guilty verdict, and then you would
yes,
have gotten sentenced.
yes,
But it did come about that they did not. They convicted both of you, but they did
yes.
not have your wife serve time. Is that correct?
That's correct. They didn't convict her on as many counts. Um, and at sentence, well, first of all, that day was the second worst day of my life. The first worst day was seeing her when she had to turn herself in when she got
Oh
indicted
yeah.
and seeing her in handcuffs. She never, she never, out of all those sports tickets, she never went to one professional game ever.
Hmm.
Now, keep in mind, we lived in Florida. My son was in
Right.
school here. How was I going to use the tickets for personal use, which is what
Right.
the allegation was? So
Yeah.
she'd never been to a game ever.
Yeah.
So they convicted her on some counts, and unfortunately for us, we thought there were two African American women in the jury, and I think they had a problem with the fact that we were well dressed. My wife was well dressed. She's a well dressed. She's a person that knows fashion, and we dress well. You can't dress down. I mean, we didn't. Wasn't like we had a lot of jewelry on and that kind of thing. We
Yeah.
weren't flaunting money, but we were dressed well. And I think the African American women, I think they had a problem with my wife. I
They
don't know
play.
for
They
sure.
played against you.
So
So
yeah,
so
they didn't convict her. And at sentencing, the judge said he makes the statement to me. He says she didn't know anything about this, did she?
Mhm.
And I say, well, first of all, there wasn't anything to know about, but yes, she did not know anything. Um, and I was stunned, Brent, because if you felt like that, why did you let the conviction go through? You should have stopped the proceedings
Exactly.
then. If you felt like
Exactly.
that, Your Honor, and we're
As the
talking
judge.
about the pursuit of the truth and
Right.
justice, why would you let her get convicted?
Right.
Why? Why would you let her convicted? When you yourself say in open court, she didn't know anything about this.
Yeah.
And if she didn't, if that says like you, then why are we talking about her being convicted? In any
That's a
event, they
real
sentenced
shame.
her basically to a day, and all that took was that she was being processed out. And so that's what happened with her.
And you find out that you get 42 months.
Right.
Um, what were you thinking? What was your guide? What was your span of time that you thought you were looking at?
Um, a month, 3 months tops, because I thought I was going to win on appeal, and I thought I would remain out on bond while the appeal was going on, and the
Mhm.
judge turned that down. And so, yeah, I was thinking when I got to this military prison, I I'm thinking I'd be there 90 days.
because you
It's
thought you
not.
could get an appeal.
Yeah, I thought
Well, I,
I thought I'd
I
be
want to
over
get,
that day.
yeah. And I want to go into that as you going into that prison and what your mindset was. Before we do, I want to take a quick break here and recognize one of our show sponsors. A lot of people don't like how they show up online, and many people think that there's no hope when you're trying to manage your reputation online. Well, there is hope. It's called the Discoverability Company. And this is a company, whether you're building a reputation from scratch, repairing your search results from a negative story, Discoverability Company can also help you how you're portrayed on the popular AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more about discoverability, it's called discoverability.co. Go to discoverability.co. They're even launching a do-it-yourself SEO option, a course for individuals who want to take on their search results on their own budget and speed. Listeners of Nightmare Success can take $100 off the DIY SEO course with coupon code Nightmare Success. And I want to recognize Nightmare Success podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group. It's the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other get through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. Okay, Mikel.
Yes.
You get sentenced. Are you immediately remanded at the sentencing?
No, he gave me, I think I had 30 days.
Okay, you
Let
get
me
30
turn
days.
in. Yes.
Okay, so you voluntarily surrender.
Yes.
Where do you go?
Pensacola, which is
Pensacola.
which is a naval base.
It's a naval base.
Yes.
Yep. And I think I think they're getting ready to shut it down, which surprises me because it's one of those. My dad also went there. He did his RDEP program there. He went from Marion and then went to Pensacola. So you go into Pensacola.
Right.
How do you walk in there? What are you thinking, Mikel? This is like someplace you thought you would never be in your whole life, and you're walking into a prison.
Well, first of all, because of my upbringing, I was built to survive something like this. So I wasn't devastated myself. I was devastated that my wife, who had never done a wrong thing in her life, had got convicted. I was devastated that I'm away from my daughter and my son now. And so I'm devastated for them because, my wife was strong, but my kids, they had never been through anything like this. And so I'm not telling you a story that you haven't heard when it comes to families, but so that's what I'm doing. I'm sitting there being processed. I get there on a Friday, and another mistake. That's the day I was supposed to report, but I get there in the afternoon, but I don't know that everything gets shut down. So I go the whole weekend with no clothes, no uniform, just that orange jumpsuit, no underwear, no toiletries, nothing. But I will say, prison, there's a camaraderie that about surviving. And one day I come back from my bed. There's you have to have your own toilet paper. There's toilet paper. There's soap. There's all kind of things sitting on my bed. One night there's a soda on my bed. The next night there's a bag of chips. So there's a camaraderie that developed over the years that started on my first weekend. But my first weekend was like the worst.
That's a hard entry right there.
I couldn't even a shower. I had no way to dry off.
It's awful.
So getting there Friday. So my first weekend was not the best experience. But that's the way prison staff think. Tough. You're in prison now. You're a nobody. Right. You're an inmate number. So there I am. But at the same time, I'm thinking I'm not going to be there that long.
So that whole time while you're walking through this whole mess, you have the bad weekend, and then you get some camaraderie, some people giving you some stuff that you need and toiletries and that. in your mind is I'm not going to be here very long. I've got this appeal thing going. I'm thinking I'm going to be here just long enough to find out where everything is. In 30 days, I'm going to be out of here.
Yes.
So how do you get, what happens?
So at some point, the bad news starts rolling in via the mail to the extent that I don't know how it was when you're there, but supposedly if you don't show up to pick up your mail, you get disciplined. Well, after my appeal was denied, and all the disbarments and the mail was just going downhill, and then I'm finding out I'm losing things, material things at home. I just stopped going. I didn't even want any mail. I didn't even want my family to send me any mail. They didn't go along with it. My wife was still sending me birthday stuff and Father's Day stuff, that she accumulated and put together. But I didn't even want to go in that mail line. I didn't, because all it was bad news. So when I get the appeal that is, that is down, that it's turned down or denied, for a couple of days, I'm suffering and I'm thinking, this is the end of the world for me. That's it. But then I bounce back and, I start to do things that are going to enable me not only to survive, but to leave in some ways a better person than I came in. One, I lost 100 pounds within months by jumping rope with a former professional fighter. But one of the guys on my detail, he invited me into this group. And so that was one thing. So that turned me into a workout beast, which I just carried on. I joined another group after that. And, that was a great thing every day at 6:00 after work. And I hooked up with a military guy who taught State Department employees languages. And so I worked with him to improve my Spanish and to get more than a basic understanding of Arabic, which allows me to have discussions and play chess with my brothers, my Muslim brothers who their native tongue was Arabic. So I was able to play chess with them, and we would have major discussions about the Bible versus the Quran. So that was another thing. And so, those were the kind of things that were, were a strength that carried me through. But like a lot of other guys, I went to every religious service that they had. Saturday morning, men's ministry. Sunday was one form of church. Monday was a form. Then there was the Spanish service. Then there was the Catholic Mass. And on Fridays, it was Juma, the Islam, Muslims.
So you went to all of them?
I went to all of them because, I wanted to show God that, I need some help.
Yeah.
So, between that strength of faith and family and the things I was doing there, despite not seeing my family for 3 years and only talking to them for a few minutes at a time during the week, despite not seeing them for 3 years, they
that
still
had to be
were
tough,
a major part of my
Mikel.
support. Pardon me?
That had to be tough that you didn't actually have a visit with them for that long.
I didn't want them to visit. I didn't want them to see me. So, to me, I'm not speaking on other guys, but I didn't want them to see me in that uniform like an animal, and then them being marched out, being searched.
It's tough. Family visits are tough.
Yeah, I didn't
tough
want
on
that.
both sides.
Yeah, and so I knew guys whose family who moved to Pensacola or nearby. I saw some of the things those guys went through, after a visit, and they would talk about how their families would talk about, how hard it was on them. So I skipped.
And sometimes, at Leavenworth, there was 3 different times that my family was turned away after they'd driven 4.5 hours because they just thought it would be, I don't know what they thought, but they knew that I had enough points for the visit. And I don't know if they wanted me to get really mad and do something, but I didn't. It was one of those things you had to swallow so hard
Yeah.
because to think that could happen, and
Yeah.
I saw them do all kinds of things with visits because my wife came a lot, and there were people that they turned away because they had a certain thing on, and they'd let other people in that had the exact same thing on. So it was visiting people in prison is tough. For me, because I was thinking about for you there's two ways to handle it. One is to cut that visit thing off so that you don't get them exposed to that. The other is you bring him into it, and maybe you can lean on each other. But no matter what, the experience for both sides is stressful. It's stressful to
Yeah.
get in there. It's stressful for the travel. It's stressful, and you don't want anything to happen once they get there. So
Right.
it's kind of hard to explain because there's a certain amount of stress level on both sides. But anyway, you've got your family. You're talking to them on the phone, and you only get so many minutes. 300 minutes is what we had when
Right.
I
A
was
month.
there. Yeah, so that's 10 minutes a day, if you time it out properly. Uh, when you started thinking about, because you got into this routine, the working and the religious and
Yeah.
the learning the languages and probably reading and
Yeah.
doing all those things. When it started getting close for you, Mikel, to get out, let's say 6 months out, what were you thinking? Because a lot of guys have a lot of different things that go through their mind when they start thinking about getting out.
Well, you need to also talk about the survival and that
Yeah,
camaraderie.
yeah,
So I can remember my first year a couple times. I must have had my head down, and a guy would say, "Hey, man, pick your head up," and that meant something. It was meaningful, and so
cared about you. Yeah,
I learned to do the same thing. And it could be somebody who you didn't know, and so I learned
right.
to do the same thing. That don't walk around. First of all, don't walk around prison with your head down. That's first,
Yeah.
okay?
Hmm.
And so that is in of itself is a support um, that can't be matched by anything. I mean, these are strangers. You don't know these
Right.
people. You probably will never see them again, but you develop this relationship with all together. Part of it's survival. Part of it is, like you say, people care. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're basically on an island that nobody leaves, and
right,
you're in a situation where you see each other every day, and you have certain people that you hang out with, but everybody has to figure out how they survive that primitive environment,
right,
an environment that none of them planned on being there, and now you're there. So how do you get through it? And everybody's kind of got a different ways, but I think one thing that happens is most people get into some kind of routine, and I think one of the reasons why people get into routines, first of all, like there's nowhere else to be, but you got to. But I also think it's a way for you to feel like you're in control of something, and when they turn everything upside down, and or they do searches or they lock everybody down, that takes everybody out of their routine, and it's like, and crazy time for people if they get locked down for so many hours, or they search and do whatever. That's they're turning the heat up because that gets everybody out of their routines, and the routines are a big deal in prison.
yeah, no doubt. And I can tell you that um, routines were a part of surviving. When I got there, I didn't find out until a year later when a guard told me, but they had been instructed to give me a rough time. Now, at the time, I was 55 years old. And so, I had a medical reason not to, work difficult jobs. Well, they put me at the
Hmm.
recycling plant, which meant I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning and be on this bus for a 90-minute ride to another military base and work in this recycling plant where I'm just filthy. My first assignment was doing some crushing with these cans. So I got all kind of juices and stuff spilling
Yeah.
all over me all for hours. And so that was a year. My second year, I showed these people in charge. They wanted me to mow lawns, and I said, hey, I'm done, man. I'm done. So they tore my paperwork right up in front of me. They was like, yeah, good luck with that. Get out there and mow that lawn in 104-degree weather.
Yeah.
And so that was my second year. And so I'm saying all that because it's building up. And you were talking about as you get closer, um,
Yeah.
as you get
Yeah.
closer to leaving. And I had a guy, my language teacher said, Mikel, you get along with everybody. He said, you get along with the blacks, you get along with the Muslims. He said, you get along with the Spanish people. He said, you get along with everybody. And what happens is, when you carry yourself a certain way, you don't demand respect, you command respect. And that's what happened. I mean, guys didn't pass me pornographic magazines or try to get me smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol because they had a level of respect. And my workout partners, when we had these revivals, they respected me so much that they would go. And so that respect turned into me getting a job working every couple of months in this garden off the base. And it was for a couple hours, and it was pretty nice, getting off of the base. But the warden, he was the one that had to approve it. And so there was a time when I was getting close to getting out where he told me, the warden said, man, you need to apply for a home visit. And at the time, only RDAP, the drug people, got home visits. But he said, you need to apply, which I did. And I didn't follow up on it because nobody but RDAP got approved. And one day I see the warden and he says, hey, man, when you going on your home visit? I said, what are you talking about? He said, I approved it. So I go back to my case manager. He hadn't even looked at it because he wasn't used to getting approvals. He looks through my paperwork and he finds out, oh my God, I made a mistake. So he then starts the process, but that includes the Justice Department signing off on it, which they say no. Well, that was a crusher because I was looking forward to going home,
Sure.
even though I was going to
Yeah.
be released like 4 or 5 months later.
Yeah, but
And
a home furlough is huge.
so
Yeah.
so here's the key, Brent. I the warden calls me and I say, what happened? He said something like you lied or something. I lied on what? He said on your application. There's nothing on the application. He had been instructed. I found out later the Justice Department had said no. You know,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
thing is, if you're really about rehabilitation, and you got an inmate that you're already letting leave the base, and you're letting RDAP people go home, why wouldn't you let this inmate go home if rejoining family was a part of cutting down on the recidivism rate?
Right.
But you're letting, no offense to your dad, but you're letting people who were drug dealers, because at the camp these weren't drug users, man. These are dealers. These are cartel people. These are people who are selling or doing something with drugs. This is not personal use we're talking about. That's
Right.
no offense to your dad. Some of them were legitimate, but a lot of these
Right.
guys, you don't use your own product, but they're going in the RDAP program, and these are the people you're going to say it's okay to go on a home visit.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, man, the justice system is
It's messed
crazy.
up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So
So
I get close to going home, and
yeah.
that's what you were asking me about. Um,
Yeah.
so I was tempted to stay because I know a lot of guys that didn't go, uh, to the halfway house, and so things had gotten so bad with the Justice Department and me that I got released at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I was getting a 5 o'clock plane or something, and I'm waiting. I'm waiting for Haig, the FBI, to be out there to rearrest me on something else. I just
Yeah.
knew this
Well,
Haig guy was going to
PTSD.
be there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just knew this guy was going to be there. I just knew it, and so did my family. Um, you know, my wife in particular. Just knew I was. I just knew I was going to get rearrested. I get in the cab. I get to the airport. I'm still waiting for Haig to pop out of somewhere. I get on the plane. So I figure now I'm going to Miami. He'll meet me in Miami, but he doesn't. My family meets me, and so that was great to hear their voice in person. my wife's voice for the first time in person in 3 years.
Yeah.
And the halfway house is calling me every 10 minutes. It's in West Palm Beach. They think I flew into West Palm Beach. They're calling me every 10 minutes saying, why aren't you here? Not considering the fact I'm driving back from Miami.
Yeah.
And so they're calling like every 10 minutes, where are you? We're going to send you back, kind of thing. It's great.
No, I mean, there's people that they do send back because they give you a certain amount of time to get there.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah. And that's a real fear too. So what happened once you got there to the halfway house?
You know, immediately I said, I should have stayed. I should have stayed on the base. You know,
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm doing here. This is ridiculous. There was nothing new. There was nothing beneficial.
Yeah.
It's run by an entity who only did it for the contract. They employ people. No, no disrespect, but I mean, even the executive director. I mean, I don't even know if she had I'm assuming she had a high school diploma. But I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Not that I'm better than anybody, but what am I doing? Why is this a part of me as well? So
And
you get into the routine here too.
And oftentimes the halfway house is worse than the prison you just left. And I know that sounds really weird, but it can be in a really bad area of town, and they lock you down, and they tell you got to these passes. It's a really strange way to come out, because you feel like you ought to be out, and you're in this halfway house that feels really locked down and really part of something that feels restrictive.
Well, I will say this: it wasn't in the worst part of town, and the food was better, because the food at Pensacola, they were serving food that had expired years before, in terms of canned goods and other things, maggots in the oatmeal, real hard story. So I never ate. You talked about making choices in prison. My choice was after the first week. I never ate in whatever they call. I don't even remember what they called it, but I never ate in there again. You familiar with mackerels, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I lived off of mackerels and Ritz crackers and peanut butter.
That'll get you to lose weight too.
And for coffee. Yeah. So then I stopped the crackers. Yeah, I lost 100 pounds. So
that's a lot of weight.
So I get at the halfway house, something that my son is graduating from college.
Yeah.
And I submit a petition to attend the graduation. Now, I'm in Florida. The graduation's in upstate Pennsylvania. And so, from a prestigious college. And so this kid has survived. He has survived losing his father, as did my daughter. And so, he's made it. And so he's looking forward to his dad coming to the graduation. But I get called into the executive director's office. He said, you can't go, but you can appeal. So I appeal. And then I'm talking to some guy at the Bureau of Prisons. He said, that's too far for you to go. Too far? Huh? I'm reuniting with my family. Right. So we have another appellate lawyer file a motion with the court. The judge signs off of it. Well, the Bureau of Prisons gets all bent out of shape. The guy calls me. He said, you're still not going. No judge has authority or jurisdiction over us. You're not going. And I told him, listen, I'm going. All right. So I don't know what you got to do, but I know I'm leaving. So the next thing I know, I get called back into the executive directors, and they have these boundaries that, you got to answer your phone, and, you got to call in, that kind of thing. But I was able to attend.
Yeah, but you put your foot down and said, I'm going.
Yeah, I attended my son's graduation.
That's great.
I saw extended family for the first time in 3 years as well. So, we celebrated his graduation, but it was also supposed to be like a celebration for my homecoming. But you come out, man, with so much shame that I didn't really want to be around anybody. I just didn't. I had a lot of shame. I worked hard to get to where I was. And I was admitted in more than one jurisdiction, and I was disbarred in all of them. And I worked hard to get there. And so to have it taken away from you, not having done anything, and not having committed a crime, and the government being aware of the fact that you didn't commit a crime, it made it real. The shame was really, it was bad. It was bad. I probably laid on my floor in my bedroom for close to a year.
Yeah. That's what you told me on the phone.
Yeah.
And what, and I think I asked you the question then, what made you get up off the floor and get back in doing something? And you said, I had to,
Yeah.
I needed
Well,
to.
my wife was a big part of that. Um, and I did go to some things that was affiliated with Congressman Hastings. Congressman Hastings put her on his staff so she could have health insurance. She was a
That's
cancer
great.
survivor.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of him to make sure that she had this health insurance, so in case something, say, kept something popped up. And so, so I went to a few events. She dragged me to a few events, but I would go to the events. He and we were good. I just got out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd come back home and back on the floor. But then it was time to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding out when I get out that I've lost everything from my American Express Black Card to checking accounts. Banks don't want nothing to do with me. I've lost, all kind of material things. I lost
Mm-hmm.
everything but my house and my family, which was
Mm-hmm.
great. I mean, in terms of,
Yeah.
it could have been
Right.
worse. I could have lost my house,
Right.
could have lost my family,
And your
could have lost
family.
both.
Yeah.
But I,
Yeah.
but I didn't. So I'm back to work. I'm still not mental health wise because I'm probably coming home and back on the floor. And it wasn't until I went into uh, therapy that was real helpful about overcoming the shame and really turning the experience of having been on both sides of the law into
Mm-hmm.
a positive, because now not only do I have a law degree and I'm still an attorney, I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
licensed in any jurisdiction, but they
Mm-hmm.
can't take away from my education. So I'm still an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still, I still have the JD. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm working. I'm off the floor, and my therapist, was a great cognitive behavioral therapist. He has helped me turn that experience into what Mandela is my mantra today. That I either win, I never lose. I either win or I learn. So the whole
Mm-hmm.
experience has become a lesson and something that I learned.
So, Mikel, so what are you doing? What are you doing nowadays? Once you got off the floor?
Yeah, I do legal. I do legal consulting,
Yeah.
and I'm back to helping people, which is what I love doing.
Yeah.
I'm not practicing law, but I can give people
Right. You're
basic
making a difference by
advice.
helping them through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
As you
So
always have. And you and I talked about this the other day. You're using everything that now you're using everything that you've done through your life and
yeah,
being able to help people and actually have an experience on this other side that brings you closer to some of these people that have the problems. So you know, your your ability to help people, not just from your law background, but the background of going through a nightmare. You've always been a political activist and helped in your community. So what I saw from talking to you is you're blending all that together, and I think it's helping you feel like that you're making an impact or making a difference for the positive, which I think is such an important thing to have in your being, that you think you're making a difference because you've gone through all this. And how do I figure that out?
and I'm going to continue to make a difference. I'm going to be an advocate. There are enough advocates out there, and it's unfortunate, and my heart goes out to men and women convicted on murder cases where they were innocent. And you
Yeah.
got advocates out there for these people to be released. You got
Yeah.
advocates for people who get disproportionate sentencing on drug cases, but we
Yeah.
don't have no advocates for nonviolent white collar people and people
Right.
who, some could be innocent and some could have been wrongly persecuted, and some
Right.
just didn't deserve the sentence that they got. Like in a state thing, you
Yeah.
hit them and say, if you ain't doing anything in a year, your record's clear. So I'm going to be
Yeah.
an advocate, and try to drum up support, um,
I love that.
celebrities, people of
I think
influence,
you'd be so good at that, Mikel.
to fight for this
I
brand of people, like they fighting for drug dealers and
yeah,
fighting for people who get convicted of murder wrongfully so. And as I
yeah,
told you, I'd like to see. Listen, President Trump. Uh, Republicans aren't the only one that are that the Justice Supreme weaponize themselves against. They weaponize themselves against whoever they don't like or whoever
right.
doesn't kiss their behind. And so
Hmm.
it's not just Republicans, Mr. President. And just so you know, I've worked with the president. I've represented him at one point in Palm Beach. And so I'd like to get a
That's
chance to talk
interesting.
to him. I'd like to get a chance to talk to him and tell him, um,
Yeah.
that the FBI, when they wanted me to wear a wire, I asked them this, Brent. I said, why are you only asking me about black politicians? I have met a lot of white politicians in my life. So they wanted to know about this local developer, and they wanted to know about Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And I said, no, 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 no. And subsequently, I had a picture of him and I at Mar-a-Lago in my office. It was the only frame, the only picture that because they came to my home and they went to my office in Philadelphia at the same time.
Hmm.
And the only frame, the only picture they broke into pieces was the picture of now President Trump and myself. And
Wow.
when they were leaving, they told me not only were they going to get my friend Shaka Fatah, but they were going to get him eventually too. Now that was in 2011. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of truth to some of the things he's speaking. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I want to be an advocate for nonviolent, white collar people who've been convicted. I also would like to testify to Congress and help them figure out, along with this justice system, is why do people who want a pardon have to go through the same agency that was a part of prosecuting them? That just
Yeah,
makes
right.
no sense
Right.
whatsoever. And so
Yeah.
I hope Congress changes that. That should be a panel of civic minded people, who aren't pushovers, but who aren't part of a system that persecuted and prosecuted you uh, in the first place.
Yep.
And
I totally agree, Mikel. And then all those things need to happen. And
yeah,
if any of those things happen, it's a huge improvement. I want to ask you something though, is after going through everything that you've gone through, the in the tough streets of Philadelphia and building things up and 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 the shame of the prison thing and then working your way through that. What do you think's your biggest takeaway through all of it?
I should add, I also, spent a lot of time growing up in Flushing, Queens, New York. So
Hmm.
I had tough streets,
Yeah,
all the way around.
all the way around.
And
Yeah,
and the takeaway, um, is that you got to have faith in something to get through this.
yeah.
Um, you got to have something to hold on to. Because
Hmm.
even when you have faith, because my faith has been questioned a number of
Hmm.
times, like you know, if you wanted to teach me a lesson, God, you couldn't do it no other way than send me to Pensacola. You couldn't do it no other way. But you do have to have faith. It's great if you have family support.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, so I'm not sure in terms of the takeaway, Brent. I could tell you this: I didn't lose. I learned.
I love that though. That should be on a T-shirt. And as long as we look at it that way, that's a mindset that you live with. As long as you don't think you've lost, that you learn something and you can move forward, because it's all about stepping the next step forward, and those are small wins. And celebrate the small wins, because that you look back and you've gotten a lot further than you thought. And I think that's a great. I like that phrase. I really do, Mikel. That's a good way to end it, because that's a great phrase for anybody who's listening. This goes into 1,100 prisons. For those out there, reentry is not easy, but you can get through it if you just keep stepping, have the right mindset. You're going to get knocked down, get back up, because have something to get back up for. And I think that's always a key. Have something to get back up for. Whatever that is, find that thing and step back into it.
Keep
I
doing
want to
what you're
say,
doing, Brent. Keep doing what you're doing.
I
Keep
appreciate
doing
it,
what you're
Mikel.
doing, my friend, because what you're doing is meaningful. It's the
I
difference
appreciate
between having something that you can look to as a resource that can be helpful to a lot of different people that you don't even know and you'll never know their name. You will have blessed. So keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
I appreciate that, Mikel. I just want to give a shout out, talking about gratitude here and how we feel about things. Homestead Financial lets me use all this fancy stuff in this equipment room. If you've got home mortgage needs, they're your people, and Greg Afteyev knows it better than anybody. If you're looking for a book out there, I've got one. It's Nightmare Success. Here it is. Check it out on Amazon. And if you got time, leave a review on Apple. That helps the show too. If you want to know more about me, BrentCassity.com. I spell it wrong. I spell it with a TY, not a DY. As I used to say to my people when I was riding back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Mikel Jones, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it today.
Thank you, man. Stay safe.
Nightmare Success, in and out.